is a process. In simple terms, theories of learning are an idea about the ways the learners learn and invent the information. Retention of the information. Theories of learning, all of you, is more. We are going to discuss everybody's life, behavioristic theories of learning. In this regard, today, the learning we are going to is a process. We are going to discuss. We are going simple terms. Theories of learning inhibit some of the an idea about the ways about the learners learn, and mostly in theories of learning invent the information. Prominent retention of the information. Theories of learning is available. Theories of learning in that one. Behaviorism, important. Cognitivism, in everybody's constructivism. And so in this regard, humanism. Today we are focusing on only. We are going to discuss. Behavior. We are going to. So most of the inhibits related to behaviorism. Important points related to theories of learning. The behavioristic mostly in theories of learning. So in this regard, we are invited prominent, the most experienced theories of learning is available for the conference. In that one, discussions, behaviorism, cognitivism, anything, connectivism. So first of all, we are introduce the experts, humanism. Professor Janardhana, today we are focusing on only and behaviorism. So most of the Swathi garu, HOD, concepts relating to behaviorism university, related to Janardhana garu, the vast behavioristic approach way. From so in this Arjun most previously were people at the conference, discussions and questions, invented a lot to the department. So first of all, we have introduced the experts a lot to the today field of psychology. Professor Janardhana Reddy garu. Today we are going to and Professor observe his discussions. Dr. P. Swathi garu, HOD, enthusiastically observe Osmania University. His experts, Professor Janardhana Reddy garu, and discussions. The vast experience so today for students. Please listen carefully. Psychology. So after completion of this total session, previously, so up to 40 minutes, we are going to discuss about the total behavioristic theories. Then after some time, last 20 minutes, we are also involved your doubts or clarifications or anything. So lastly, one by one, please clarify only regarding this sessions questions only, not other general questions. So the number is 040-23680-456. Once again, 040-23680-456. So now, Janardhana Reddy garu, what about the behavioristic theories of learning? How we can identify, how we can explain about that kind of theories?
Thank you, Narsimulu, for your nice introduction. As you said, there are different approaches to understand and explain human behavior, starting from psychoanalytic approach and behavioristic approach, humanistic approach, cognitive, like that. Different approaches are there. Now we will be focusing on only behavioristic approach to learning. Different theories are there under the category behaviorism. So let us understand very briefly about behaviorism. What are the chief characteristics of this behaviorism and who are the psychologists involved in behaviorism or behavioristic approach to learning? The first person who has done maximum contribution to psychology to understand human behavior and also learning, that is Watson, and is considered as the father of humanism. Like that, a number of persons are also involved in developing various theories to explain human behavior and also the learning. And each theory focuses on different concepts. Everyone has his own concepts, but all lead to the behaviorism. And chief characteristics regarding the features of behavioristic theories of learning. One is they focus on environmental factors. They said the behaviorism is learned. That is, behaviorism is acquired. That means environmental factors play a major role in learning and human behavior. And the theories, prominent theories relating to learning are the operant conditioning, that is Skinner, and classical conditioning done by the BRAOU, and the trial and error learning, that was formulated by Thorndike and derived reduction theory of Hull. Of four theories, let us see the evolution of these four theories. First, we take up the operant conditioning. I have not explained in detail about the classical conditioning. It is one of the foremost theories and pioneering theories as far as the learning is concerned. It was done by the Pavlov. He is a Russian psychologist. The next person came is Thorndike. Thorndike, he has also contributed a lot to in developing the learning theories, and both Pavlov and Thorndike, they have published beautiful publications. And the first one was published by the Pavlov in 1897, and Thorndike published the theory publication on learning in 1898. Regarding the sequence of the theories, the first is classical conditioning, that was done by the Pavlov, as I said earlier. Next is the trial and error learning, that was formulated by the Thorndike, and this led to the development of many theories. Many theories like including Skinner and Hull, they have adopted certain concepts from the theory of trial and error learning. That is why his contribution is more, the Thorndike's contribution. And the Skinner, he has adopted one significant concept of Thorndike, that is law of effect in the form of reinforcement. That concept was adopted by the Skinner, and he developed his own theory that is called operant conditioning. Similarly, Hull also. Hull actually was inspired by the Thorndike's research, it is Thorndike's research, and including the Pavlov's research also, including that also Watson also. His contribution to the learning theory, he was influenced by these three persons mostly. That's Pavlov and Thorndike, this Watson also. So we will be focusing on the trial and error learning first. Before we discuss in detail the theory of trial and error learning, we will first deal with the classical conditioning, the various features of classical conditioning that was developed, as I said, by the Pavlov, who is a Russian psychologist. So next we will discuss the trial and error learning.
Yeah, okay, sir. So Madam Swathi garu, the behaviorists believe that the learner's mind is a blank slate that's ready to absorb knowledge. We so many times observe these kind of statements. So based on this, how we can explain the classical condition of theory about the Pavlov's contribution to the learning?
Right. So as Sir has already explained, there are various theories, behavioristic theories of learning, which would be very useful to us in our day-to-day life. And you all know that what is learning. So when you are learning something, when you are experiencing something, definitely there might be a relatively some change in the behavior which occurs because of our experience. So behavioristic theory says, like, whatever we are learning from the environment. So environment will have an impact on us. So under this, one of the important contributions that are made by the psychologist Ivan Pavlov is the classical conditioning. So what exactly is this conditioning? Generally, like when two events happen together, how you are connecting to it, how an individual is trying to see the association between those two events, and then trying to understand the relation between it, whether it is positively or negatively. Accordingly, the conditioning is developed. So here we have two types of conditioning, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So the first important theory is the classical conditioning, and you might have read about the classical conditioning. It all began with the experiment on a dog. So when the dog's behavior was experienced by the Pavlov, he observed that every day when the food is given to the dog, automatically it was awaiting for the time and the food to occur. So even before the food was given to the dog, the salivation has started in the dog. So that has surprised the Pavlov, and he wanted to see what are the various factors involved in this. So basically there are 4 elements in this conditioning. Whether we are speaking about classical conditioning or operant conditioning, there are 4 elements. One is unconditioned stimulus. So unconditioned stimulus in this experiment on dog is food. Conditioned stimulus is the second element. So we'll come to that conditioned stimulus later on. Generally, you might have observed whenever when the dog looks at the food, whether you are offering or whether it has picked up the food, what is the response given by the dog? That is, saliva will start. So that is unconditional response. No one taught the dog you have to salivate when you are looking at the food. So here, like, food is the unconditioned stimulus and unconditional response of the dog is the salivation. So these are the 2 elements which we have seen before conditioning has occurred. It is something like which generally in the natural day-to-day life also we observe. I have mentioned already about the conditioned stimulus. So what is this conditioned stimulus? This has been introduced by the Pavlov. He just wanted to see before the food is given whether we can give any stimulus and see how the dog would respond. So here the conditioned stimulus has been taken as the bell. So bell sound has been given and they tried to observe the dog. There was no response. The dog looked at the sound from where it is coming and it was calm. There was no reaction from it. Then immediately after the bell sound is given, the food has occurred. Naturally, when the food is seen by the dog, it would respond. 2 things, the bell sound and the food has been paired together, and over a period of trials, when these 2 have occurred at the same time, the dog has started responding to the bell sound itself, because it has learned that if there is a bell sound, that means I can anticipate my food would also be arrived.
That is the conditioning.
Yeah, so this conditioning has occurred. So here, like the bell sound, originally a neutral stimulus, that has become the conditioned stimulus when it has paired with the food. And when the dog started responding to the bell, naturally the dog has learned to respond to the bell, so that we call it as the conditioned response. So these are the 4 important elements which we have to remember in the classical conditioning. So before conditioning, there is only US, UR. That is unconditional stimulus like food, unconditional response like salivation. During the conditioning, CS and US followed by UR. After the conditioning has happened over a number of trials, we are seeing CS and directly the CR, conditioned stimulus and the conditional response. So this is the basic important theory that we have to remember. And there are other concepts like higher order conditioning also. Like once the experimenter is convinced that the dog has conditioned the bell sound and also the reacting to the food, that is reacting to the bell, they try to associate another stimulus, that is before the bell, they gave the light. So initially, whenever there is a light that is on, the dog looked at the light but no response. But when it is paired immediately with the bell and bell followed by the food, so when these 3 things have occurred over period of trials, the moment the light is on, the dog started responding. So this kind of a conditioning can happen with as many stimulus as possible. So we can say higher order conditioning can be increased. So this is the basic experiment related to the classical conditioning.
So thank you, ma'am. So based on this conditioning, deconditioning, we are using some kind of techniques in the counseling also.
Right.
Yeah. Sir, Janardhana Reddy garu. So what about this trial and error learning? How we can explain about the total theory of learning part, the trial and error? Thorndike given some such kind of important theory, no?
So as I said, that Thorndike has formulated a theory of trial and error learning. We know that most of the innovations and discoveries are made through trial and error approach. No innovation came all of a sudden. It came through various trials and errors. It is there since a long time. And the Thorndike focused on this because he worked a long time in the training college as a professor, teacher training college. That is why he focused and he wants to know how the learning occurs. So he shows this type of trial and error learning. And he contributed a lot and his theory to the field of education and also therapies and also clinical and educational psychology. For example, his theory, his contribution to educational psychology, for example, these learning theories and other theories, for example, the applied behavior analysis, and this came origins, we can find the origins in the theory of the trial and error learning. He is a famous person. He was inspired by the G. William James and also the Cattell, who are American psychologists. And he developed through his experience, he developed his theory and the basis, how he developed his theory. Most of the behavioristic theories or behaviorists, they relied on experiments. All of them have conducted many experiments. Just now, Dr. Swathi said that Pavlov has conducted an experiment on dogs and explained the theory of classical conditioning. And like that, many behaviorist psychologists, they have conducted experiments on different animals like cat and rat, dogs, horses. Many animals were taken and conducted experiments on them. Regarding this Thorndike approach or Thorndike theory, trial and error, he said that learning occurs mostly through trial and error. To establish his theory, he conducted a simple experiment, and the experimental setup is very simple. He had one box. It's a puzzle box or a cage. It is also called a cage, and it has one door, and that can be opened only when we pay that inside, when a person or somebody gets something else presses the button, that will open. It is a box or cage with a door that can be opened when a lever is pulled or pushed. And outside the cage, a food was kept. A tray of food, a dish of food was kept outside the box. What the Thorndike said they did is, he took the cat, hungry cat. He took that hungry cat and placed it inside the box. And the door was closed. And outside the box, there is a food. When the hungry cat was inside the box, the initial trials, it made erratic movement inside the box, random movements, and chaotic movements inside the box. And it has jumped, it has moved here and there, and it has scratched, it has hit. It made several trials to come out of the box because he wants to escape from the box to have this dish of food. So in spite of several tries, he could not open it. He was making random movements inside the box. All of a sudden, the door was opened. The cat came out and had the food. Now you think how the door was opened. Did the cat know how to open the door? No, he doesn't know how to open the door. But the door was opened and immediately came out. The reason here is, when you are moving erratically, randomly, it accidentally hit or pushed the lever and it was opened. So it came out and had the food. That means learning has not taken place at that moment. It was an accidental success. So again the cat was put inside the box. What the Thundak said is, after this, he has taken the cat and placed it again in the box. And again same thing, it did the same thing, random movements, erratic movements, here and there, moving, hitting, scratching, all behaviors were there. And again, it so happened it has pressed the button or pulled the lever and door was opened. And what the Thundak did is, every time he noted the time, how much the cat has taken in the first trial, how much time is taken in the second and third or fourth trial, like that. Several trials were there. Maybe 12 trials were there. And every time he recorded the time taken and also the errors made. How many errors were there in the first trial and in the second error, in second trial and third trial, like that. So, like that he repeated, trials were repeated. He observed that the time taken for opening the door or pulling the lever is reduced. Gradually, there is a gradual reduction in the time. And also he noted the errors. And there are also a gradual reduction in errors. Reduced with every trial. So this finally, learning occurred. After many trials, learning occurred. The moment cat was put or placed inside the case or box, it opened the door. It learned. How it learned, that we have to understand. How the cat learned without taking much time. In the first time, it has taken longer time, but subsequently or gradually, that time was reduced, and at the end, it has not taken much time. Immediately, the moment after the placing inside the box, it came out. So here the learning occurred through trial and error. Nothing has occurred only through trial and error. And on the basis of this, we can analyze various principles, various concepts out of these simple experiments. The first thing, one thing is multiple responses, the concept of multiple responses. Initially there were multiple responses, number of responses or more. That out of multiple responses, gradually it narrowed down to 3 to 1, like that. Finally, out of multiple responses, the cat has selected, identified one response, and response was fixed. That is fixation of response. Selection of a response and fixation of response. That the response was fixed. How can we say that response was fixed? When the cat was inside the box, many attempts were not there. The moment it was inside, the response was immediate. The very first response was opening the door and coming out. So here, what is the response? What is the stimulus? That you have to understand. The stimulus here is the food and coming out or escaping. Food is there. If the cat is hungry, see, it wants to eat. That made him to come out. There is a stimulus, and opening is also another stimulus. So the response is opening the door, the pulling the chain or lever. The right response came after making several trials, after making many errors. So that is why he has proved. That is how he has proved how the learning takes place through trial and error, through experience only. It is only through experience that cat has learned to press the lever and to escape from the box and get the food. This is briefly about the Thorndike's theory of trial and error learning. On this basis, many theories, many principles are also identified that we will discuss later, the principles that were developed on the basis of trial and error learning.
Okay, based on this trial and error learning, generally when the trials will be increased, errors will be decreased. సో తెలుగులో సాధనమున పనులు సమకూరు ధరలో అన్నట్లు సో ప్రాక్టీస్ మేక్స్ మ్యాన్ పర్ఫెక్ట్. సో మ్యామ్ స్వాతి గారు, సో వాట్ అబౌట్ previously we discussed about the classical and operant conditioning. So what about especially operant conditioning? And what is the difference between this classical and operant conditioning theory?
Okay. Classical conditioning, just now like we have discussed about it, it is called as respondent conditioning because the dog is waiting for the food and then once that stimulus has occurred, only then it is responding to it. Whereas operant conditioning, the name itself is denoting the organism, that is whether it is an animal or an individual, they have to operate on the environment to get something. So this is also called as instrumental conditioning because they have to play a vital role in order to get something. For example, like I want good marks. So to get the good marks, I cannot wait for the marks just like a Pavlov's dog. I have to operate in the environment. Only then I can get some whatever I deserve it, whatever I require it. So here, based upon like Thorndike's experiment, influenced by it, Skinner has developed the operant conditioning. So he has used a box which is famously called as Skinner's box. So Pavlov has used the dog, Thorndike has used the cat, and Skinner has used the rat. You know, like rats are very known for their intelligence, right? So in the Skinner box, the similar experiment has been done. Like the food has been kept outside the Skinner box and there is a door for it. It can be opened only when the rat can press the lever or the bar, whatever it is. So like in the Thorndike's cat's experiment, the similar movements have been shown by the rat also. And finally, accidentally it happened to click the lever or the bar. The rat could come out, it took the food and immediately it was kept inside. So when certain trials have happened, naturally the number of trials have reduced and the rat has learned how quickly to press the lever. So here, as the question is the difference between classical and operant conditioning, in the classical conditioning, the dog is not operating on the environment. It is just waiting for the food and then responding. Whereas in the Skinner's experiment, if it wants the food, it has to play an active role. It cannot play a passive role like the dog. So the rat has to operate on the environment and get the food. For that reason, we call that as the operant conditioning. But here also, this is also known as the conditioning because there is a food, based upon the food, contingent upon the response of the organism, the reward, that is the food has been given. So Skinner is the first one to use the term reinforcement. All of you know, like the term reinforcement is extensively used in the educational system and in the clinical settings. So this reinforcement acts like a reward. And there are different types of reinforcers, positive reinforcers, negative reinforcers, and generally like when we give something that is attractive to the individual, in order to get something, they will do the task. Negative reinforcers, to avoid when they are avoiding certain aversive stimulus, only then they would be giving the, that is aversive behaviors, only then they would be given the reward. And similarly, we have primary reinforcement, something like a food is a primary reinforcement, and secondary reinforcement, it is something like a money to which they can exchange the food. So there are different types of reinforcement which has been discussed by the Skinner, and he also mentioned in detail about when and how the reinforcement schedule has to be planned. So there are schedules of reinforcement like fixed ratio responses, in variable ratio, then interval ratio and interval variable schedules. So here, like for example, like if I want to get a reward, I have to exhibit the desired behavior at least 3 days in a week. So the 3 days is the fixed response. So when I am trying to show the desired behavior by the teacher or by the parent or by the hospital people, so when I exhibit that behavior 3 times, whatever I am asking to like give the reward as a reward, they would be giving the reward. So there is a fixed response. There is an variable ratio. Variable ratio is at least once or twice in a week I have to show. It is nothing like fixed how many times. Similarly, we have the interval, like whether it is once in a week or twice in a month, whatever. So the schedule of reinforcement has to be taken into consideration to reward the individual. This is basically the most important thing, but he is the first one to really use the operant conditioning principles in order to bring about the change in the behavior of the individual. Generally, the principles of classical conditioning will be used to understand why a particular behavior has occurred. For example, if you are seeing a child or an individual with high levels of anxiety or any kind of a phobias, the reason for that could be understood through the principles of classical conditioning. And if you want to change that behavior in the individual to reduce that anxiety or phobias or any other behavior, we can bring in the principles of operant conditioning in order to modify the behavior, in order to change the behavior of the individual.
Yeah, really, we are observing regular educational setups of these classical and operant conditioning. Sir, Janardhana garu, so what about previously you told that the laws, he developed trial and error learning some of the laws. And what about that kind of laws in the application orientation?
Yes, the Thorndike, as you know, the experiment to formulate his theory. Out of his theory, he has identified the laws of learning or principles of learning. Primarily identified 3. Their major, the theories, major principles or laws of learning. One is the law of readiness, the other one is the law of effect, and law of repetition. And he also said that learning is gradual. Learning occurs when there is a strong connection between stimulus and response. Connectionism. The connection should be strong between the stimulus and response. So regarding the principles, the law of readiness is according to the Thorndike, he used the term preparation. It should be prepared for learning. And they should be, in general terms, preparation or readiness means one should be physically, emotionally ready to learn. That is the one principle that he has identified. Another important principle or law that he has identified is law of effect. What it says, law of effect? Here, according to him, undesirable consequences, undesirable behaviors are stamped out, and desirable behaviors and desirable experiences are stamped in. That means when the favorable experiences are favorable or pleasant in nature, that response will be repeated. That is what just now the madam said, that concept was used by the Skinner also. The consequences of response, when they are satisfying or pleasant or favorable that response will be repeated. Similarly, undesirable or unpleasant experiences, unwanted things, annoying things are avoided or stamped out. He has used the term stamped out, stamping in. This most important thing, important concept that was used in various fields, including the counseling psychology and also the clinical psychology. Many therapies or principles are developed on the basis of this operant conditioning. And the other one is exercise. Exercise means the repetition, the using the response that was selected. We are learned to one response is learned. If that response is not repeated, if there is no possibility or opportunity to repeat it, that will lose. It will not have any value. So to have a permanent, long-lasting impact, learning, that has to be used, that has to be repeated. That means when the response is repeated, that SR connection, that is stimulus-response connection, will be strengthened. If the repetition is not there, there is a possibility that the connection between the stimulus and response will be weakened. So to avoid this, to strengthen the connection between the stimulus and response, the opportunities should be provided to repeat or to use the skill that was acquired or to use the knowledge that was acquired. So as part of this, two more concepts are developed as part of this law of exercise. That is law of use, law of disuse. What we use, that will last long. What we don't use, that will not last long, that will be forgotten. So he according to his theory, he said for long-lasting impact, that has to be repeated, that the skills learned or the knowledge acquired should be used. And disuse of knowledge or disuse of skills will result in the extinction. These are the primary laws. And subsequently, few additional laws were developed or formulated. There is a law of recency. What we learn recently, the chances of remembering will be more. And the law of the primacy, the principle of primacy is what we learn first. The first impression is best impression. That is, slogan is there. That is, the proverb is there. What we learned first, the chances of remembering will be higher. There is another principle, the chances of the law of primacy, the primacy law, and also the law of recency. And few more additional laws were also identified. For example, this multiple response I explained earlier. So these are the major principles that were identified the Thorndike.
Yeah, okay, Madam Swathi Garu. So what about the principles of conditioning of both the classical or operant conditioning?
Yeah, we have just seen what is classical conditioning and operant conditioning based upon the experiments done by Pavlov and Skinner. So here, irrespective of whether it is instrumental conditioning or respondent conditioning, principles of conditioning are same. So the first important principle is about acquisition, that is acquiring something. So here, what is that we have seen in both the experiments, when the stimulus has been presented and repeatedly when it has been associated with another pair, automatically they try to see the connection between the two variables and then they have picked up, like we can interrelate these two, we can anticipate something, and so we can respond to that. So this acquisition is taking place during the period between conditioned stimulus and the conditioned response. Then the second important principle is about generalization. So what is generalization? We have stimulus generalization, response generalization. Suppose like when the dog has learned that I can respond to the light or bell, when a similar stimulus like light has been given, slowly it also generalized the same kind of try to give the same response even to the light. And if we introduce another stimulus before the light, definitely like the dog would respond even to that over a period of trials. So the stimulus generalization has occurred. Similarly, the response generalization also has occurred. So when I learn to respond to one stimulus, I also learn to respond to the other stimulus. So it is something like, if I like sweets, whether it is made of sugar, whether it is made of jaggery, I try to show that interest towards the sweets. So this is something like response generalization. We also have a discrimination. Discrimination here is trying to distinguish to which stimulus I should respond. For example, like if we are teaching a pigeon, like in the Skinner has done an experiment even on the pigeons. Initially, he made them like learn to peck the button so that it would get the food. Something like how the Skinner's box the rat has done. Once the pigeon has learned to peck the button to get the food, whether it is a big button, whether it is a small button, it started pecking it. Okay, it's a big experiment again, we are not going into the details. So the stimulus generalization has occurred, whether irrespective of the size of the button. At the same time, they also experimented on discrimination. So they started giving the food only if the pigeon has pecked the green button but not the red button. So over the period of trials, the pigeon has learned, why should I respond, why should I peck every time the button? I will respond only to when there is a green button but not to the red button. So there is a discrimination. The pigeon has learned to distinguish between the two different stimuli and started responding only to one. So this is discrimination. Then there is extinction. Extinction is another principle. Suppose like you started giving the food whenever there is a bell sound, the dog is responding. You are giving the bell sound but you are not bringing the food. Trials, the dog will think like the food will approach as the bell sound is given. But when it realized only they are giving the bell sound but not the food, it will stop responding to the bell sound. That is, the extinction has taken place. The behavior that has acquired, the behavior that has been learned by the dog, it stopped. Do you think like it will become a permanent kind of an unlearning? So they wanted to know, after a few days, if again the bell sound is given, whether the organism will respond to that or not. So surprisingly, they found after a few days, when the bell sound is given, the dog has again responded to the sound. That means whatever response has been learned, it has reoccurred. This is called spontaneous recovery. So these are the basic principles: acquisition, generalization, discrimination, extinction and spontaneous recovery, which are the basic principles that are proved through these experiments and which we can see even in our day-to-day life. For example, like all of us, when we go in the traffic, you stop whenever there is a red light and you will start when there is a green. So you have learned the discrimination, right? The discrimination of the behavior. So you know, like when there is a red light, if you push forward, move forward, you will be punished for it. So to avoid that, you will wait. Similarly, like extinction is something like where you can take in the classroom, you are talking with your classmates and then the teacher has scolded you. You feel, okay, why take this insult? You will stop talking for a couple of days. Again, after 1 week, you may get back the same kind of a behavior, right? So these are the things like where we can see in our day-to-day life, whether it is at the personal level or in...
Yeah. Sir, Janardhana garu. So one more behaviorist, the Hulls developed the drive reduction theory. So what about his theory, sir?
Yes. The Clark Hull is another psychologist who contributed a lot to the learning theories. He developed his own theory that is titled as drive reduction theory. So let us understand what is drive, what is this reduction. First, let us know who is this Hull. Hull is also a very popular psychologist. His theory is also very popular in earlier days, and it also paved the way for different theories, other learning theories. So his life theory is based on the concept of homeostasis and also the reinforcement. So what is this drive? So the drive is a force. It is a need. It is when there is a drive, the drive creates a tension or unpleasant feeling in person. Drive. So the people, they want to avoid or reduce the drive. So drive here in this experiment, drive is the stimulus. It stimulates behavior. The Hull said the major force behind human behavior is the drive. The drive stimulates people to behave. So that means drive is an essential factor for the behaviors or even for learning. So here, as I said, there is a drive is a stimulus. This drive is a state of tension. It is a state of unpleasantness. So naturally the people, they want to avoid this state of tension and also the unpleasantness. What is this homeostasis? Homeostasis is here, the principle is, it is a state of balance, equilibrium. The state maintaining the status quo, stability. When there is a deficiency in the person, a need is created. There is a change. He said that the Hull used different concepts to explain the drive reduction theory. The first, there is a need. That means there is a deficiency in the person, biological deficiency. It can be hunger, it can be thirst, or any other thing. When you are hungry, that forces the people to eat. When you are thirsty, that forces people to drink water. So that is, here the force is the drive. So need deficiency is there. That is the need. So need creates the drive. So that means need leads to drive. And drive leads to behavior. So naturally, when the drive is there, deficiency is there, that leads to imbalance. So to avoid the imbalance and to lead to balance, so the people naturally, they are indulge in activities. So that is behavior that lead to goal attainment. That is homeostasis. When the drive reduction occurs, when the drive is satisfied, there will be a reduction in this that leads to homeostasis. That means by imbalance, there is an imbalance in the person. Because of the imbalance, it may be it is physical imbalance in terms of the hungry or in terms of thirsty, or like any other thing. That imbalance leads to the balance through various behaviors. So he focused more on the drive. And what is this drive reduction? So drive reduction is the reinforcement. The drive, when the behavior is there, that is satisfaction is there. When we are thirsty, we drink water, that drive is reduced. We have come to the normal state. So drive reduction is an important thing, and it is placed and it is based on the concepts of homeostasis and also the reinforcement. And there is another person who is associated with this drive reduction theory. His old student by name Kenneth Spence is another psychologist who is a student of Hull. So he has added few concepts to the theory of drive reduction theory. He has disagreed with the certain concepts of Hull, and at the same time he has agreed with the concepts of Hull. He supported the concept of reinforcement, and he has disagreed with other, that is reinforcement or reduction is the only force that leads to the response. He said it is something more. And to put it in simple form, the performance occurrence, how the performance can be improved. He discussed it. Hull said performance improvement would be there because of reinforcement. He disagreed with this. The Kenneth Spence disagreed. Reinforcement he has agreed. Reinforcement is required. But at the same time, he said that is not sufficient. Something more should be there for reinforcement. Reinforcement here, the number of the occurrences or repetition. Too many reinforcements, number of reinforcement. With increased reinforcement, Hull theory says, with increased number of reinforcement, the learning can be improved, performance can be improved. But he has not disagreed. He has not agreed with this the principle. The Kenneth principle said we require something more. What is the something more? He said he has developed the concept of latent learning. Latent learning. So what is this latent learning? He says even if the drive is there, unless there is an incentive, people will not take activities. That means incentive is there. That means the organisms will not exhibit behaviors, the learned behaviors. The organisms have learned one behavior. For particular behavior he has learned. So when there is a drive, naturally, automatically, that behavior should be repeated. But sometimes that behavior will not be repeated. Learning is there. Learned behavior will be there but will not displayed. He said that is called latent learning. And when behavior occurs because of the incentive. Some certain incentives should be there. And regarding drives, there are two types of drives. One is primary drives, and another one is secondary drives. Primary drives are biological in nature, like thirst and hunger. And secondary drives, what are the secondary drives? The secondary drives are the drives that emerged from these primary drives. Because of the association with the stimulus and response. So secondary drives occurs later because of the association with the stimulus and response. So these are the two types of drives, primary and secondary drives. Under secondary drives, one is social acceptance, other one is money. For example, a person is hungry. So naturally, we can go and eat to reduce the drive. But how to get the food? We require money to buy the food. That is what he said. Food, okay. Food is one important thing. But how to get that money, the food? So here the money money is required. So when we are hungry, you buy the food and we solve that hunger. Another one is social acceptance. The behavior should be socially acceptable. Whatever behaviors that we display, that should be socially acceptable. That means unacceptable behaviors will not be displayed. So these two primary, the secondary drives, some of the concepts related to the secondary drives are also there as part of this drive reduction theory. This theory is also very popular, but for certain days afterwards it has lost its importance. When this Skinner's theory came, or other theories came, it lost its importance. Earlier it was a very popular theory. This is about briefly about the there is a drive reduction theory. So that means reduction is a reinforcement.
Yeah, thank you.
So regarding the operant and classical conditioning, Madam has beautifully explained the principles involved in classical and operant conditioning. For the benefit of students, just I want to supplement one or two ideas. So for simplicity, this classical conditioning mainly focuses the stimulus. It is focused on stimulus. The basic difference between the operant conditioning and classical conditioning is the classical conditioning focuses on the stimulus, association of stimuli, whereas the operant conditioning is focused on the response. That is the one difference. And the implications of this operant and conditioning theories, Madam has already explained. It has tremendous influence in different fields. Regarding this, the clinical, regarding this counseling psychology, how the principles of classical conditioning and operant conditioning, in what way these are useful in conditioning in classical, this counseling psychology. So many therapeutic techniques, they are developed on the basis of this both classical and operant conditioning. For example, you take the systematic desensitization technique. What is the source? What are the origins? So systematic desensitization, SDT, systematic desensitization technique is drawn from the principles of classical conditioning.
Overall, today we were discussed about the behavioristic theories. So thank you very much, Professor Janardhana garu and Dr. P. Swathi garu from the Osmania University. So today, orally, we are discussing about the 4 theories of learning that is relating to behaviorism. So behaviorism is the most important factor compared to other approaches. So today we are discussing one is classical conditioning and operant conditioning and drive reduction theory and trial and error learning given by Thorndike. So mostly we have covered the behavioristic theories of today's session. Upcoming next session, so we will discuss next another topic. Thank you very much, experts and organizers, for giving me this kind of fruitful discussions for the purpose of psychology students, either at UG or PG level. So we are very thankful to all the participants, those who are listening. It is very useful to you and useful to the society. Thank you very much.